You are watching and listening to the We Are West Ham podcast with me, Will Pugh, and it's the Opposition View. I'm here with Sun Sports Deputy Head of Sport, Dean Scoggins. West Ham versus Tottenham, the battle for 16th on Sunday afternoon at London Stadium. I can't think of a game between these two clubs where both sets of fans cared less about the outcome. Obviously, it's always good to beat Tottenham, but with Spurs ahead against Bodo Glimt after the first leg of their Europa League semi-final, cruising towards a final with Manchester United. This game comes sandwiched in between both legs. Dino, it's almost comical how bad of a domestic season both of our clubs have had. Not dissimilar though, you're in a not dissimilar position to what we were in David Moyes' last season. Not last season in charge, the Conference League winning season. Where the second half of the season it was like, league doesn't matter anymore, all out for Europe. What are you feeling about the whole situation at Spurs?
The whole situation is just slightly ridiculous because like Thursday night was fantastic and it's the atmosphere that's been missing, it was performance that's been missing, and the sort of, you wouldn't think it was the same group of players, manager and supporters in the stadium for the league games as it is for the Europa League games. So it's just bizarre, and I, as much as I love delving into tactics and formations and all that, as you know, cannot put my finger on it at all. To me, it can only come down to that the players only now care about Europa League football, and just by dropping off by 5% in the league, that's enough in the Premier League to lose the game instead of being in it. So the league season's been over since the first week of February. Yeah,
well, ours has been over since September, to be quite honest. But you'll get lots of people on the radio, and loads of you watching will have sort of seen and heard the usual suspects. You go, it's a disgrace. Look, Man United are getting the same thing. Looks like after their excellent first leg performance against Bilbao, they'll be in the final against Tottenham. As it looks, anything can happen, of course. But you'll get all those people going, it's a disgrace that Man United, Roy Keane, I think, was giving them both barrels like a couple of weeks ago to when they're talking about Europe. Personally, I sort of find it quite difficult to go, well, why wouldn't you do that?
Absolutely.
If you're Ange, he's under loads of pressure. Man United getting a load of grief about not caring about the league as much. But isn't it just sort of human nature that you would put all your eggs in the Europe basket?
Absolutely.
Because who cares if you finish 12th?
As you guys showed and got a trophy at the end of it. Yeah. That's the whole goal. And I can't wrap my head around some of the negativity around some of the fans. I got the hump quite a lot on Thursday night with some people who were so negative coming to the ground. I was like, come on, this is a semi-final first leg. Cheer up. Please cheer up. Like, we don't see this every year. And, it's go back to 2019 for the Champions League run, and we didn't think we'd see it again, and how we've seen it again this season is ridiculous. So no, I'm totally with you. I think there are a lot of similarities between the two teams at that point, but also I feel a bit like the form in the Premier League is a disgrace, or has been a disgrace, and would continue to be if we were out of Europe. But because we're still in it, imagine that as a player, like even subconsciously you go in for this big 50-50 hit and you've got a semi-final of European competition, or now possibly a final of a European competition. I'll pull out of it.
Or you'd go in 40%, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very difficult as a squad as well, because it's become very clear through the season that Tottenham have like two teams. Because the team that was injured then saw us plummet down the table because they were all out injured. They all came back at the point we came back into Europe, into when the European games restarted. So therefore, the players who are like the B team feel like the B team. So how do you get yourselves up to go to Anfield when Liverpool are going to win the title and try and put in a performance? They actually played all right for half hour, to be fair, but
maybe that was the warm up.
But then that edge, that edge that I talk about is gone, and that's why maybe they should give the points on Sunday to the team who cares less.
That's why it's going to be a draw.
It's a competition for who cares less.
But what do you put it down to at Tottenham then? Because I think first of all, and the Conference League was a similar thing for West Ham, right? Where our only real football challenges probably came from the quarter-final stage onwards. And even then, I think we played Ghent or Genk from Belgium in the quarters of the Conference League, AZ Alkmaar in the semis, and then obviously the final against Fiorentina, who are arguably the better side on the night. But then our Europa League run as well. Obviously we went deep in the first time out, beat Frankfurt, lost to Frankfurt in the semis.
Yep.
You guys beat, of course. And then it was by Leverkusen, who were at the time the best team in Europe, unbeaten, who knocked us out in the quarters, the second Europa League run. It's easier up front, isn't it? In Europe, there's a clear gulf between teams in the Premier League or in the Europa League, and the conference.
Well, the new format changed that a little bit because there was some jeopardy, but Spurs sort of had, other than like Galatasaray away, had a sort of fairly comfortable run. But they played well in it. So and that was what was slightly disturbing early in the season, was that we were seeing performances in Europe that we weren't seeing in the Premier League. But again, the level drop is slightly down.
You'll look better, won't you?
Absolutely,
against weaker teams. So
and the travel and stuff like that was easier. When you've got teams coming to the Tottenham Stadium, the journey through it was much easier when we had a couple of home games in a row that helped us out because we didn't have to travel, and then players like Archie Gray and Lucas Bergvall who came through in those early stages. It was a nice way of bedding them in and giving them a bit of confidence. So that worked when the Premier League stuff didn't.
Yeah, sure. What do you put it down to? Ange Postecoglou, I've heard it levelled at him before, that he is a manager who has to be managing the best team in the league, or one of the best teams and squads in the league, for his style and his play to work, right? I've heard the same thing levelled at Pep Guardiola before. There's a few managers like that, and it sounds an odd thing to say, but whose styles, and I think Lopetegui was a bit guilty of that at West Ham. He was playing as if he was manager of Sevilla still, one of the top 4 squads in Spain, or he was Man City manager. Pellegrini did a bit of that. And it's like, no, you have to be a bit pragmatic and manage West Ham. Do you think that's why Postecoglou's style looked better in Europe, because you could be so dominant? But if not, what do you put the league form down to? Is what I'm getting at.
I think that the injuries cannot be overlooked, and everyone sort of goes, well, everyone gets injuries, and yes, they do, and yes, lots of teams have lost big players, but Spurs in that period from October to January, it was totally unprecedented. It was just ridiculous.
Just remind any West Ham fans who you lost.
Oh well, I mean the entire 11 really. I mean you've Pedro Porro was probably the only player who stayed fit. So Vicario, Romero, Van der Ven, Udogi, Basuma, Bentancur then gets concussion. Maddison was then out. Solanke missed a couple of months. Son has then followed up that with another injury. So and it wasn't just the sort of the number of injuries, because if they don't happen all in the same order, you can sort of manage 2 or 3 positions at a time. It was just an avalanche. And for Archie Gray to play his first 20-odd Premier League appearances as a centre-back or left-back when he was brought in as an 18-year-old holding midfield player, just goes to show. And look,
there was that period when you had almost like all of your starting defenders weren't fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we played, there was a game where I think you could actually, let's say that the only starter would have been Heung-min Son in the 11.
And if you were in charge, he wouldn't
have played either. But let's not go there. But so there was definitely that. But there's definitely this whole thing where Postecoglou's got this very rigid way of playing. And when it's going well and everyone's doing everything one touch and it's flying forward, and a European night where the crowd gets going and it all gets the positivity reigns, and like when we were top of the league, go back 18 months, and we were top of the league and it was all everyone's talking about Ange ball as the greatest thing they've ever seen. As soon as one part of it breaks, it all kind of breaks down, and that's definitely the criticism of him, that he didn't have not a plan B. That'd be unfair, because there have been games where we've pushed the high line up and drop the line back, and there have been games where we've played behind the ball. But the way of scoring goals and the way of going about playing is quite rigid. And so if you're missing the fast winger or the underlapping fullback, it doesn't work. And the striker, I feel so sorry for Dom Solanke, because in the games where it hasn't been working, he ends up running about 25 miles in 90 minutes, and then when the ball gets in the box, he can't get there.
Because he's exhausted. Well, I went to the away game at Spurs earlier in the season, towards the beginning of the season, when we got absolutely humped. You were imperious. Again, you were 7 out of 10, and me and you could have knocked together a team and given West Ham a game. Around that time, Lopetegui was an unmitigated disaster, as you know, and that game was the real turning point for me. even I was already turned, but I was like, nah, this is not good enough. And Dom Solanke then, he was superb, quite frankly, and he had been for a long time. Talk to me though about Postecoglou, because obviously he's dividing opinion at the moment. It feels a bit of a cliche question to go, if he wins you a trophy, because it also really annoys me when football fans don't discount the cups. It's like when you go into a football season, any football fan will go, it'd be good to have a cup run, the top half in the league, whatever. At West Ham it's like that anyway. And then, so when one of those things doesn't happen, it's almost like the cups don't matter anymore. Yeah. They are part of the season.
Absolutely.
But just on Postecoglou, first of all, what are your thoughts on him? Like, I suppose that
I loved him. I loved him early on, and a lot of that was like I had a lot of sort of. It was almost apathy to that at the point where we went from the end of Poch into the Nuno, Jose, Conte period, and it was and I know that especially West Ham fans will get the hump with the Tottenham way and all that sort of stuff. But every club has their own view of how they want their team to play, and the Tottenham thing, there is something about. And I think West Ham are one of those clubs as well because of the history of young players coming through the academy and all of that, where you feel something about the way a team goes about it. And all of a sudden, under Postecoglou in the first season, we had an identity again, and then we kept winning in the last minute, which helps early on. Yeah. Beating Liverpool, Sheffield United was another one that springs to mind where we were 1-0 down in injury time, and there was this bandwagon that was rolling, and then we got hit by the injuries, and the wheels came off a little bit. So, but Postecoglou is a bit like that sort of grumpy dad where, you sort of, he takes you to the theme park and it's all absolutely brilliant, and then you get stuck in traffic on the way home, and then he gets really, really angry and tells you off for making any sound whatsoever. And it's sort of that's the way it went. My turning point with him was only very recently. I was trying to stick with it, giving him the slack of the injuries. And if Liverpool had spent 3/4 of the season without Romero and Van de Ven, and I would say Spurs actually it's probably more like 85% of the season without Romero and Van de Ven. If Liverpool had no Van Dijk or Konate for that period, they wouldn't have won the league. No. They'd be better than Spurs. They'd be higher up the league than Spurs, but they wouldn't have won the league. Yeah. So you had to cut him some slack. But then all of a sudden, when you start nibbling back at fans and the sort of cupping of the ear at Stamford Bridge, when the goal hadn't even been confirmed yet, that's just bad news. And falling out with your fans is just not the way to go. Yeah. But having said that, if Tottenham was a different sort of club where there wasn't this anger between the ownership and the fan base, where the manager's sort of stuck in the middle of those two things, I would be backing the project. I'd be going, well, if we get to a European final and maybe even win the thing, look, and we finish 15th, 16th in the league, then I don't really care because we finished 5th the year before, which got us into Europe. Yeah, yeah. If we get in Europe again, we can go again. Totally. And last summer, the club got a bit carried away with the Postecoglou factor, and he's guilty of that as well. But the profile of player that we brought in, the two fullbacks are early 20s, one of the centre backs early 20s. We brought in 2 teenage midfielders. We were relying on a 17-year-old academy product in Mikey Moore to be like the extra attacker. Yeah. The money that we spent was on Odegaard, who is again a teenager under 21s. We went into the loan market for Timo Werner, which just stopped. But then after that, it's Matisse Tell, who's also a teenager. Yeah. So the profile of the players was so. If we were 8th in the league with no injuries and in a European final, everybody would be going, Spurs are coming again. And I know they're not because that's where we are in the league. Yeah. But that's where. But the problem is, I think Postecoglou has gone past the point of no return. Really? Yeah, I really. Even if you win, because I'm sorry, but if you win the Europa League. I mean, I'd be laughing at other clubs if they did it. Don't get me wrong. I'd be laughing at other clubs if they won a European trophy and then got rid of their manager. I would. Yeah. But I just think that the feeling inside the club now is so divided, and the Daniel Levy as the chairman is getting more grief from the fans than the manager is. So what happens then? The chairman gets rid of the manager. And also, if I was Ange Postecoglou at this point, I might be saying, I'll go. It's so funny, right? Because this is almost mirror image to after David Moyes won the Conference League, right? It wasn't great in the league. I think we finished 14th that season. We'll take 14th now, yeah. Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. Tell me about it. We finished 14th that season and then obviously won the Conference League.
And it was like that. And I was saying it as well. You know as well as anyone, I'm a huge David Moyes advocate and Moyes fan and wouldn't have got rid of him. But I was saying, if we don't win the Conference League, time to go. But he did win the Conference League. Like, he went out and he'd done it. And if Tottenham, all of the Spursy chat, 2008, wasn't it? Nearly 2 full decades since you've won a trophy. You've even had to have
and that was
like
a League Cup as well. That was a League Cup.
Yeah.
So that shouldn't be, you know, this whole ranking. You know, it's getting compared to Eric Ten Hag at the moment, Postecoglou, and that's absolutely ridiculous because A, Man United have won trophies consistently over the past 2 decades when Spurs haven't.
Yeah.
And secondly, the FA Cup is here. Great, amazing. And the Europa League is up here. It's a European trophy.
The second,
yeah, absolutely. And then when Spurs won the Carabao Cup, or at the time the Carling Cup, which is down here on that pecking order. So yeah, Juan de Ramos, you know, it was a different feeling around the club as well at that point. But Spurs have kind of backed themselves into a corner.
But if he does that, I'm sorry, he's got to get another go. And I appreciate all the stuff he's saying, and I do think surely he's got to make some changes and have a bit of a plan B, because ultimately, while at first everyone was lauding it, it actually starts to look a little bit unprofessional and a little bit bad management when you just go, this is what we do.
Yeah.
It's like, but you're getting tonked every week.
It absolutely does.
Like, if that is what you do, then... Well,
but the other side, and I'm almost going round in a full circle here, I don't mean to, but the other side of it, I think, is that because of the players we bought last summer, it was like what they should have done was buy a Premier League ready midfield player and a Premier League ready centre back at that point, and they didn't, and they bought youngsters, and so that was nice. And no, I don't think anybody really disagreed with those signings.
Find a balance.
Until then the injuries happen, and then you've got to throw these youngsters in. You know, and all right, we had a success with Bergvall, and Gray did well up to a point, and got a bit knackered, to be quite honest. But then, so this summer, if we were to win the Europa League and they stick with him, then you should be able to go again. You know, go and get an Eze, go and get a Gahey, and go and say, yes, we're going to play this way. But then if we get an injury to Son, to Kulusevski, to Solanke, to Romero or Van der Ven, we've got an international Premier League ready player to replace him. Because it felt a little bit like the squad was split in two, as I said, that A team and B team element. Whereas the successful sides, when you've built a squad over a period of time, you sort of forget a player's missing. You sort of go, oh yeah, he hasn't played for a while. You know, like Curtis Jones got injured for Liverpool, you know, quality player, been out for 6 weeks, and he comes back from injury. Oh, I forgot about him because they've got 3 other ready-made replacements who had just come in, and Spurs are not at that point, and that's where I feel a little bit sorry for Ange, because as I say, without an injury crisis, we can argue to the cows come home whether he was part of that problem or not. But without that, we might be in this position where Archie Gray might have played 5 games and everyone was going, I'm excited to see more of him next season.
Sure, in the Cups, Just really brief then on that. There has been suggestions that Ange's style of play, particularly with your defenders where you play the high line, the amount of sprints they're having to do, recovery sprints, compared to most other teams in the Premier League and Tottenham teams of previous, is so much higher that it's putting a lot more strain on the defenders' bodies, and that is, so it's almost like the style directly impacts the injuries. Do you buy into that?
I think there must be an element of that. There must be an element of it. But also, the second half of the season, he has changed that. That whole mad day at Chelsea, you know, the middle of last season, when everyone sort of noticed it was happening, that was because it was against Chelsea, and quite frankly, they didn't think Nicholas Jackson knew the offside law and could finish. So they just thought, well, let's take a gamble and stay up. Eric Dyer was playing in that game, by the way. So it wasn't just about Van der Ven and Romero. You know, Eric Dyer was playing in that game. So it was... I think there must be an element of that, but I do think that, you know, there are some players who just attract certain types of injuries, and Mickey Van der Ven clearly has, you know, he's built as a sprinter, and hamstrings and whatever with fatigue are going to go, and that's where. But if you'd had the backup for him, maybe he wouldn't have got that many injuries.
You still like absolutely devastated Eric Dyer never won the Ballon d'Or, aren't you? Greatest defender you've ever seen.
Listen to the Bayern Munich fans now. They can't believe he's going.
Never had anything like it. Just real quickly then, and this isn't as facetious as the question sounds, but what do Tottenham fans want? Because, or where do you go from here then, right? If you go away from Postecoglou, because strangely, the Postecoglou appointment is very much one that lots of what I call like the Football Manager fans, and West Ham have got stacks of them. There's a bloke who sat behind me for 20 years at Upton Park. All he'd ever shout was stupid if the ball was played sideways or backwards.
Sounds like the guy who sat behind me on Thursday.
He'd go, play it forward. Yeah. And as soon as you didn't, he'd say stupid. No understanding that football's about more than that.
Yeah.
But the Football Manager fans, as I call them, that appointment and how Postecoglou played, at first, it was a bit of a fingers up to people like me going, nah, see, you can do it if you're a bit braver. Now it's like, oh yeah, no, you do need a bit of balance. But as you mentioned, you've listed those managers already, the Contes, the Mourinhos, the Nuno Espirito Santo. Levy was like, right, proven winners, Espirito Santo aside. Then you've gone down the Postecoglou route. He sort of obviously had, this is all since Poch, who feels like was kind of the right blend of that, but had some amazing players as well. Where is the sweet spot then? Where do you go next?
It all depends on the Europa League, because if we win it, right? And we have to win it. It's not just about getting to the final.
No, definitely. Yeah.
You know, we have to win it. And if we do win it, then I wouldn't say like watch out everyone else. that you know, because I'm a realistic Tottenham fan. That's not what I'm saying. But it's almost like all of that Spursy stuff and all of the weight that hangs around managers, players, fans, all of that will go away.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as you experience yourselves, you know, like that's a proper trophy. You've won a proper trophy.
Yeah.
And so that can go away. So there's two schools of thought there. One is stick with the manager and trust the process, to use an Arteta phrase. And he's won the trophy, so now back him whether that takes another 2-3 seasons to do it.
Yeah.
Or wipe the slate clean
and
then say, right, now we're going to have a proper project without any pressures. Because I think the Conte appointment, the Mourinho appointment, and, you know, even to a certain extent Pochettino before that was like, we want a quick fix here. We want a quick fix because this whole thing around trophy, and the Spurs stuff is just hanging around everyone. So if that was removed, the mistake they made after Ramos when we won it in 2008 was to not go, right, we're going to say, we're going to wipe all these massive contracts who aren't contributing to us away and go from the bottom up. And we have actually got a really good core of quality young players in the squad at the moment, and we only really need a dusting of Premier League quality experience to lift that up. But you can't do that when you've got this trophy league, Champions League qualification thing going on where we don't really know what we want to be. If the trophy's ticked, then they can go, right, we want a 3-year plan now. And I mean a 3-year plan. I'm not talking like just accepting that it's going wrong in the first year and cutting the manager out. A 3-year plan to be a serious Champions League team in 3 years.
When you say reset then, what do you mean? Reset with a new manager?
Yeah, new manager, new recruitment staff and a new setup entirely. And the Spurs fans would like to think Levy's not part of that as well. But actually go, we've delivered eventually what we wanted to deliver in a massive trophy. And we've got the best stadium in the Premier League with the most profitable club in the Premier League. And now we need a team on the pitch that matches that without the pressure that goes with, but we've got to deliver now. You know, build up and then be serious about it. And look, I hate to say it, but like what Arsenal have done with Arteta, where they won that FA Cup with Emery's team, that took the pressure away, and now the pressure's coming back on. But that's because they're a quality side now, and they've done that over that year. Hugely improved, and they've done that over a period of years, not weeks and transfer windows, years, and that's what Tottenham have got to do.
Right, Dino, this is probably the longest opposition review I've ever done without talking about the game. Without talking about the actual game in question, because I just think West Ham go through periods, and we have done probably for 18 months now, a little bit longer, where almost the short term doesn't seem to matter. It's much more bigger picture. It feels like Tottenham are, obviously the Europa League is the short term, but then it is a where do you go from there. But just talk to us about the game. Who do you think's going to play? I mean,
I think there'll be
really
9.
Don't care, do
I don't care, because I went to the Forest game and we played quite well again with a sort of mixed team that day, because there was some that needed some minutes in order to come back to the Europa League. And we did play all right in that game, and we deserved to actually get more than the 2-1. A draw would have probably been fair, because Forest are a very difficult team to play. But I don't think anyone could have said we wouldn't have deserved it if we'd have nicked it 3-2, for example, with some of the saves that Matt Sells made. But we'll see a split team. We might see 8 or 9 changes, but you know, Jed Spence will play right back. It will be Danzo and Davis at centre back, I would think, and then it's a question of I would imagine he'll rest Udogie. He might even play Archie Gray left back in the game.
Yeah.
We've got no Bergvall, no Maddison, so Basuma will probably play as the holding midfielder again, and then it's a question of who else comes in there, who else he has in there to play again. Solanke will be rested, so Richarlison will play up front.
Yeah.
I would imagine Matis Tell will play on one wing because he came on for half on Thursday night. And then we'll probably see Odobert play on the other side instead of Brennan Johnson, who played the full 90.
Yeah.
So, a couple of issues in midfield. Bentancur's been excellent for weeks. So, from a match-winning point of view, he should play. But again, he needs to be wrapped up a little bit before the plastic pitch in Bodo. So, it will be a bit of a split team. But I always think a team like that are quite dangerous as well because a few of those players, Odobert, Tell, Richarlison, and Jed Spence will be saying, and Danzo will be saying, I want to play in the Europa League, so I need to put in a performance to do that. So I don't think we'll be a walkover, but I think at your place, you're favourites.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe underestimate quite how rubbish we are, to be fair. Do you think you'll lose?
I think we'll probably lose because we're so open that we'll give even a team like yours who struggles to create lots of chances will give you chances, and it will become a little bit standoffish, I would think, by the second half. But I would suggest we're talking a 2-1 or 3-2 West Ham win. Yeah,
and just talk to me then, Dino, quickly. It's sort of they were the greatest days of my life, certainly my West Ham supporting career when we went deep. Those 3 years we had in Europe. How are you feeling at the moment? Are you confident you're talking about the final already?
Yeah, I'm buzzing. I mean, without that Bodo goal late on, I'd have probably booked some travel. But look, there's still some jeopardy because it's Spurs.
Yeah. Right, nice one. Thanks for listening and watching, everyone. This was me, Will Pugh, with the opposition view with Sun's Deputy Head of Sport, Dean Scoggins, big Tottenham fan, ahead of the game on Sunday. Really one last chance to get excited about anything at West Ham as the worst season in history, or certainly modern history, comes to an end. It really has been pants, but fingers crossed if the sun's out, get a nice win over Tottenham, maybe go through a few of their stars and see if they could get knocked out of the Europa League. Look, thanks for listening and watching, everyone. Don't forget to follow us on socials at @WeAre_West Ham on Twitter, We Are West Ham Pod on Instagram. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and don't forget you can become a Patreon member if you want these podcasts 24 hours before everyone else and ad-free listening. It's patreon.com/We Are West Ham Podcast. Thanks for listening. West Ham are massive. Up the Hammers. Me and Jones will be back next week.